Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Lewis Gilbert's Moonraker from 1979. So yes, here we are, back again to talk about James Bond, this time the 11th James Bond film in the franchise. So very much kind of in the middle, almost, these official, of course, Eon Productions Bonds, but yes, of course, I have announced that I will, talk about Never Say Never Again. I'll check that one out for the first time. I've never seen that, and yes, the Casino Royale 67 spoof. So yeah, we'll check them out, of course. But in terms of the official series, this is very much close to the middle, of course. So yes, the 11th Bond, the 4th Roger Moore Bond film, and of course the final Lewis Gilbert directed Bond. So yeah, very interesting details there, in that sense. Of course, John Barry actually returns to score this film, which is great. One of my favourite, five or so favourite kind of composers, I would say. I've kind of said that before, but John Barry, the one and only, really. John Barry, he was just one of the very, very best film composers for me. And yes, this is a film that is quite divisive. Of course, spoilers alert. If you haven't seen this film, certainly check it out. It's the one that I recommend every Bond. Maybe you can skip one or two of them if you're not too intrigued by seeing them. I'll get to them. I haven't gone to them yet in this kind of series watch. There's only two ones that I would really say that they don't really feel like Bond films to me whatsoever. But yeah, really I recommend checking out every Bond if you haven't done so already. And yes, this film it's definitely one that I'll be kind of getting into kind of spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out and then come back to this review. With that said, of course, here we are. And yes, we'll talk about this film. We'll carry on talking about Bond. This is, of course, a very divisive Bond film, and this is kind of. I was thinking about this earlier. This is, this kind of series rewatch. This kind of challenge again. Well, it's not a challenge, but this kind of endeavour, of course, that I set aside. I kind of announced this in February. I think it was, beginning of February. Saying, of course, that I want to go through all of the Bond films again. In time for April, of course, and then I would go to see No Time to Die, but of course, that's not happening, and it's very different. It's panned out, very, very differently to what I imagined, and actually, it's kind of nice, at the same time, to kind of, more in a more relaxing way, perhaps, go through these films, kind of space them out and let kind of the thoughts, the feelings linger, and then, of course, give a review. And I watched this again the other day, and it's a very interesting film, and it's kind of a one that relaxing can kind of sum this one up, actually. And last time round, for those of you who don't know, I kind of said this is a film that I don't dislike. Really, at least I didn't then. I didn't dislike it, and I didn't really know what to think in terms of, do I like this film or not. It was very much maybe, but maybe not quite. It's certainly a little bit kind of under par for me. It's a Bond film that I kind of thought was a little bit under average, and but not a bad film by any standards. In terms of the overall piece here. It's a very, very divisive film. Critically, it's very, very panned at times, and one of the lowest scoring films, for example, on IMDb for all the Bond films. So very interesting, and it's kind of got its fans as well. Some people do really like this film, and I think this time around, just watching this, in a particular way, and sitting back and of course, yes, with the mindset that, this is not one of the best Bonds, at least in my opinion, thinking that I don't think this is one of the best, and just to kind of absorb this film and just to watch it, and I think, that's definitely led to a kind of, well, not a re-evaluation, but a kind of, more of appreciation for this film, and I do actually, I definitely like this film now. I certainly think it's not a bad film. I never thought that, but it's certainly quite impressive, actually. And I think, in terms of the rankings, it may have moved up a little bit, but we'll see about that. Originally I said this in Octopussy, kind of pretty close together. But I think we'll see what I think rewatching Octopussy, if it can kind of climb above this. But I do kind of like this film now, and I think it has a lot going for it. It has some really kind of wonderful music in the film. You've got many pieces of classical music, of course, and yes, different film music as well used. Magnificent Seven, which is it's kind of used in a maybe unnecessary way, as you can say the same the kind of the Close Encounters reference, and also the 2001 Space Odyssey reference. But the Close Encounters one, of course, the kind of unlocking that kind of door there, that room, using the kind of 5 notes, the tune there, I believe that Spielberg, of course, was approached, they asked if it was okay to use this, and of course he actually said, well, it actually led to the kind of use of the Bond theme in the Goonies, of course. So yeah, it's very interesting. But yes, it has different references in the film. Also has, of course, yes, classical music used in here. But John Barry, provides the actual original score to this film, and of course Shirley Bassey for the final time, sadly, performing the actual title theme, Moonraker, and it's a very interesting film. This, it's an average Bond for me overall, but what I really like is the kind of breezy feeling it has. I do like Roger Moore again, of course, in this film. I think Jaws, actually, is better than I remembered. You can kind of say that there's definitely some unnecessary moments, I think, a bit too silly moments, in the film with Jaws, especially the kind of scene where he kind of falls in love. It's a very bizarre scene, and, it just, it really is insane, that scene, but, I can kind of, it's kind of funny at the same time, but yeah. This film, of course, concerns this American space shuttle, being kind of stolen, mid-flight, if you will, and then Bond is sent to investigate, and kind of leads to this, this kind of uncovering of this plan by, of course, Hugo Drax, played by Michael Lonsdale. We'll get to that in a moment, in terms of talking on the villain, but yes, he kind of uncovers this plan, this kind of poisoning the Earth, everyone on the Earth, and then repopulating, in space, and of course the different couples we see, the kind of pairing, between the different pairs, of course, going up into space. This is, of course, part of the plan, and it's kind of, I've seen it in a few films, that kind of idea, in that sense. But yeah, it's got its bad moments. I feel this film, it's got its kind of cheap moments, moments that really are just too silly for me, in the context of the film, and or really any film. But at the same time, I do actually like this film. I think it has a lot going for it, in terms of the visuals, the music as well, and just the kind of at times the comedy. I think it does work, quite effectively, and I think Jaws in this film, I think actually he is pretty good in this film. I think there is a kind of a thing to be said, the fact that he is, a kind of a villain again, and then they kind of they turn him, into this completely, this good guy, in that sense. And I think yes, the kind of the turn, the kind of shift there is very abrupt, really. It's also kind of it is cheap, in my opinion, personally. Again, at the same time, having said that, I think actually there's kind of this innocence to it. This very basic feeling about that kind of that shift. But in the context of this film, and considering the tone of the film, and really the Roger Moore Bonds, a lot of them, I think actually it's not like it gets a pass, in that sense, but it does actually kind of strangely, bring this kind of nice feeling, this innocent feeling, to the fact that how basic this kind of moment is, this turn, and the way it kind of turns out, in the end, with Jaws kind of helping Bond, and ending up with someone else as well, and kind of going off, and the wave and everything. I think actually it's kind of funny to see. It's kind of charming in a very strange way. The one thing I really do not kind of take to is the way that he does speak. Jaws, I think they should have been left out. The fact that Jaws, kind of speaks in the film, it really doesn't work for me. I think it's kind of one of the moments I kind of, I say, that's a shame, that maybe could have been left out and it would have been better for it. But having said that, I think Jaws in the film, nowhere near as good as, for me, as he was in Spy Who Loved Me. But I think at the same time, definitely enjoyable. And, without him, actually, without Richard Kiel, it would have been a lot kind of less enjoyable. The kind of back and forth between him and Bond, the way he's on the case once again, kind of dumbed down in that sense compared to, of course, the previous entry. But at the same time, definitely enjoyable. The kind of relationship over the film between Bond and Jaws is definitely enjoyable, and I think Jaws is definitely better than Hugo Drax in the film. But Richard Kiel, yes, does bring a kind of an innocence to the role again, and definitely less menacing. Of course, that's what they were going for in this film, but definitely enjoyable in this film, and it's very different. You can't compare it to Spy Who Loved Me. The tone and the approach, but I think at the same time it's not it's nowhere near as good for me personally. But at the same time, it is an enjoyable film in its own right, and yes, of course the first act is definitely less over the top and less kind of sci-fi influenced. Of course, as I said in my last review, this film really came about because of Star Wars in a nutshell, and of course, films like Close Encounters, and stuff, but mainly because of Star Wars, and they wanted to kind of postpone For Your Eyes Only. Of course, that's the next film after Moonraker, but of course, that was originally going to be made after The Spy Who Loved Me, but yes, they wanted to cash in on Star Wars, really. So we have Moonraker, and the kind of final act is the definite kind of I wouldn't say tribute, but really yes, the take in that sense on the kind of Star Wars esque kind of theme, and you've got all the different kind of yes, the kind of lasers, and the kind of shootouts in the end, and all the different moments there. Definitely, kind of that's what they're going through there. It's a very interesting film. It's one that it's not one of my favourites in the franchise, but again, I do enjoy this film. Certainly now, I do find comfort in the film. It's kind of a one that, again, it's a one that you can kind of go into, at least in my experience, kind of sit back and maybe not expect to be blown away, and then it's a better experience. Knowing it's not a Bond film, that maybe would move me like Casino Royale or On Her Majesty's Secret Service or From Russia with Love, or Doctor No, or different films like this, Skyfall. But it's a one that it's a silly kind of. It's a Bond film that doesn't take itself too seriously, at times, and it's just kind of a fun watch in that sense. Although it does have some flat moments. The first act, of course, as I said last time round, I thought that was the best act of the film. I'd probably change my mind. I'd probably say the kind of the middle act of the film, the middle portion, is actually the best, or really from the 30-minute mark to the kind of 1 hour and 20 mark. That's kind of the best of the film, I feel, and the different chase scenes and different moments there, and just it's definitely got its enjoyable moments. This film, I think, and the first act though, it's kind of a bit flat at times, but again, I was enjoying the film. It's a very breezy feel you get, and a very very beautiful film. This the photography here, the way this film is shot, is quite nice to see. I must say that, and the actual score, the John Barry score is very very different to the previous scores. You do have the kind of 007, kind of. It's kind of a secondary theme, to the kind of Bond series. This is the final appearance of that. I've mentioned that, kind of piece of music that's used before, and it's kind of this kind of upbeat kind of music, of course, used mainly in action scenes throughout the series, of course, until this film. But here we have it a little bit slower, maybe trying to be a bit more epic in that sense, and just more of a kind of slower rendition of this, and that kind of sum up the film. It's a very kind of I would say definitely, slower use of music here. Very, very, kind of prolonged times, pieces of music used instead of, explosive, bombastic pieces, perhaps. And the kind of way they've kind of, altered this theme, kind of fits this film. Actually, it's kind of nice because it is the farewell to that kind of theme. I'm kind of obsessed with, actually. I must admit, and yes, it's very nice to see here. Although very sad, that never appeared, of course. And who knows what it would be like, if they ever use that piece again, in the maybe the current films, Bond films. But again, I guess it's very different now. No longer do we have these films that are kind of at times, this kind of feeling of escapism and just charming feeling. As much as I kind of love Skyfall and Casino Royale is its own thing. I can't compare it to that. And I do kind of like a couple of the Daniel Craig films. I love, of course, Skyfall and Casino Royale, but they're obviously not that. They're not the same kind of films, and they're very much more gritty and more kind of for example, Skyfall is definitely more of a kind of serious drama. So maybe it wouldn't work using kind of scores, or pieces of music from these past Bond films, in them films. But again, at the same time, it'd be very nice to see one day, perhaps, if this is ever kind of implemented, in that sense, and maybe even references to some of the older Bond themes, like Goldfinger and stuff. Would be great, actually, if pulled off well. But yes, I love the use of music in this film. It's very nice, very pleasing, and I think that's one of the main kind of standouts in this film is the kind of visuals throughout, and the use of music. Really, really nice. And again, there's moments I maybe don't kind of feel the kind of use of Magnificent Seven theme is necessary and stuff, but mostly the music is definitely really enjoyable to see and to kind of hear in this film. And you have some really interesting moments in the first half, or the kind of first act of the film, and then of course it really picks up in the energy and of course uncovering the plans of Hugo Drax, of course, and Michael Lonsdale as the villain. By no means is this my favourite Bond villain, that's for sure. I think definitely a little bit maybe a bit flat in this film, this villain of Hugo Drax, although I kind of enjoy him at the same time. I think there's kind of a charming nature about this performance, and even just the fact that I think the kind of kind of basically the afternoon tea with him and Bond, in the first kind of 20 minutes or so, very bizarre. It's kind of very, even though it's very, very kind of flat. There isn't really any tension in that kind of scene, and the way it plays out. It's not really, it's kind of taken seriously, but it isn't really. And despite that, I do kind of at the same time enjoy the kind of relaxed, kind of tranquil feeling that this film has at first. And I do enjoy Michael Lonsdale in the film. Don't get me wrong, but I don't really find much tension, within this kind of hero-villain kind of relationship, and I don't really feel that it's, for example, a menacing performance. Hugo Drax, is this character who, in some regards, you could say is kind of this weasel character, very, very, sly, at the same time, while I do kind of appreciate the kind of the slyness to this character, and maybe the more quiet nature of this villain, I do think is kind of, at times, a slightly weaker Bond villain than, what I kind of would expect, kind of thing. I don't think it's one of the best Bond villains by any means, but at the same time, pretty decent, quite enjoyable, mainly for the kind of performance by Michael Lonsdale. But yes, I think it's definitely not a kind of a film where the kind of the hero and the villain dynamic is kind of established, in this kind of meaningful way. It's kind of, as I say, little afternoon tea in that sense, and kind of a bizarre moment, with this other character in the background, this kind of fight scene. But yeah, again, I love the locations. I really like that location there, actually. Kind of when they're kind of in the room there, that kind of the whole location there, and that kind of estate there is just so nice to see, and I loved that kind of helicopter, and the shot there when they come into the kind of the location there, and the kind of the way the film is shot is really really nice. I think some of the effects, definitely flawed. Later on in the film as well, the kind of the laser moments there, definitely quite cheap, despite the budget, being a lot more than Spy Who Loved Me. Again, it feels like a step down in the production, just in kind of really in every aspect. But again, I think the kind of score in the film makes up for that, and I think it has got its beauty to the film. And I don't think this is a kind of a lesser Bond film, at all. I don't think it's a bad film. Really, there's only a few films, in the series that I do, personally consider bad. But even then, there's kind of mostly something I can take from the, my kind of least favourite Bonds. And I certainly take a lot from this one. I think Roger Moore is definitely, back again, giving, a charming performance. And of course you have Lois Chiles. She is of course the Bond girl, and great name here, of course, Holly Goodhead. That is the name, and I think an enjoyable Bond girl. I think I really like the way it kind of ended with them, and that line there. Maybe it's not a line. Of course, the line she says there. That's everything. Kind of I think a line that everyone likes. Kind of responds to there, or kind of thinks much of. But I kind of picked up on it again. I really like the last line of the film, and the way they kind of just go off there. It's a really beautiful moment, and I love the kind of score there at that piece, and I like the ending, I really do. And I kind of, as well, as I said, I like the way it kind of ends with Jaws going off, of course, and I don't like the way he kind of speaks. I think they could have kept it to the kind of no dialogue role, of course. But yes, it's very much a kind of a pleasing ending as well at the same time. But yeah, it's a film. It has its flat moments early on, and also, despite the kind of final act kind of growing on me, of course, I do think the kind of final act is also definitely flawed, very much so, and also just littered throughout. You have that scene. That whole kind of sequence, the worst sequence of the film by far is, of course, the double take pigeon and the dog looking up. It's kind of like this elegant dog, looking up, kind of posh, if you will, dog looking up, of course, at Roger Moore, bounding over the kind of the streets there, the music kicking in, and of course, everyone's seen the scene. Really. I guess you know what I'm on about there, but yes, just a very disappointing scene. It's kind of funny at the same time, but I do think this is the worst sequence of the film. It's definitely moments like this I think bring the film down. I can't deny that, but at the same time, if you get past the kind of these moments, because that moment is just so kind of. It's so insane and so kind of unfortunately poorly done. The double take pigeon, just kind of the way they use stock footage there, and as well the moment when the man kind of looks at his drink there, kind of as if he's drunk too much, and that's why he's seeing this kind of madness. Or no, that is not the case, of course. For some reason, the filmmakers thought this would be a great scene, but in my opinion, it's not. But yeah. Moments like that, it's just a whole kind of unnecessary sequence there, and it's really bad, unfortunately. But it's kind of funny. I can understand how it would appeal, in that sense to different people, and I do find some humour in it, of course. But at the same time, it's very cheap in my opinion, and definitely not a scene that kind of blew me away by any means. But I do think yes, once you get past these different moments and the kind of flatness to the film, at least in my experience, I think it's an enjoyable film. Overall, it has its flaws. It's a film that I don't personally find anything too kind of emotionally investing to the film. It's more about the nice feeling it has, and the kind of the kind of relaxing feel and the charming nature and some of the comedy. Some of the comedy works quite well, if only kind of face value and a few laughs and kind of mild laughs and just kind of a smiling experience. Nothing too kind of all that's genius comedy or anything like that, like say Goldfinger, and stuff, or moments in the Connery films, for example, and or even just The Spy Who Loved Me, moments in that, the previous Bond, but at the same time, even though it's kind of face value, very very basic comedy in the film, it does, for me, add to kind of an enjoyable experience. And yes, I think this is a decent film in the sense of the kind of reputation it has. It's grown on me a bit. I think it's not more than average. I don't feel this film personally, but I do understand if someone thinks this is kind of a very good film or a good film. I personally call this an average film, taking everything into account. The flaws, the moments I don't kind of like too much, for example that kind of sequence we've discussed, and also the moment actually where Jaws falls in love. That's not a good scene. It's kind of really insane, kind of funny, but very strange scene there, and definitely not a scene that I'm a big fan of, but I think it has these moments. It has these kind of strange occurrences and different moments that do kind of taint the film, definitely so. But it is kind of flat at times in different places. In the first act and then the last act, in particular. But I think at the same time it is an enjoyable experience. I think it's an okay film. It's definitely not a bad film in my opinion, and I do recommend it, if you've not seen this film, or maybe just seen it once, because, from my experience, it's grown on me. It's a film that I do find quite a few things to kind of admire, and just to kind of feel like a kid again, actually, just in certain moments with Jaws. I know they kind of dumbed him down and made him more over the top and more kind of less menacing and more kind of silly. And of course, The Spy Who Loved Me is kind of this perfect balance for me, and kind of blend of these two kind of characteristics. But this film is more all out kind of silly. Jaws, at the same time has a kind of a menacing appearance. Of course, due to the height, etc. But I do think it's definitely kind of dumbed down and more kind of it's less menacing, but it kind of adds to this this charm as well. So it's an okay film. I think John Barry provides a very impressive score. The actual the use of classical music and different kind of references. I don't. I'm not too fond of the kind of reference to the Close Encounters theme there. It's kind of off-putting. It's one of my favourite films. Not saying anything against the film, but the use of music there is a bit. It happens. I believe twice in the film. Of course, with the opening the kind of the lock there. But a bit on the nose and a bit kind of just very pointless for me. But despite that, I think the overall use of music and different references in the film, and yes, use of classical music and the combination with that, and of course John Barry's original score, using of course an original pieces of music in this film, and of course going back to kind of pieces from previous Bonds I really love. Very very sad. It's one of the saddest moments in all of Bond is the kind of last appearance of that kind of 007, of course, kind of theme there. It's not the main theme, but it is kind of a secondary theme to many of the early Bonds, and it's very very sad to see that kind of go after this film. But at the same time, I do love the kind of use of that in the film, and yes, I think Roger Moore is decent in this film. I think Lois Chiles, she is good in the film, pretty good. I think it's kind of an enjoyable relationship in this film, and I think maybe some of the other secondary characters, kind of bring the film down at times. But overall, the main cast here, definitely solid. Again, Michael Lonsdale is enjoyable in the film. He's charming, but it's not a great villain by any standards, in my opinion. But yeah, I think there is a kind of really good moment actually early on with the dogs there. It's quite a kind of an effective scene, very scary there, and but apart from that, I don't think it's really that menacing. I think maybe they were kind of trying to go for that, but it didn't quite come off well in that sense. It's more of a kind of a charming, mainly due to the performance, charming kind of entertaining at times performance Bond villain. Overall, this film is definitely, yes, as I've said, an okay Bond. I don't dislike this film, definitely not. It's grown on me, over the years. I think after kind of multiple rewatches, I think this film, is average. It's definitely not a bad film. I don't agree with the fact that this is, maybe the worst Bond, of all time, for example, which has been called. I think there's a lot to kind of to take from this film. The locations I love, the use of music, the score, of course, and Roger Moore, of course. I don't think this is his best or anything kind of performance throughout Bond, but at the same time I do like it, of course. Roger Moore, just such a legend as always, and wonderful individual. It's very sad, of course, truly tragic that he's no longer here, but we have these 7 films to kind of go back to, of course. And yes, just take in his performances, really just a treat, of course, a gift, and just brilliant to see Roger Moore as always. And yes, not given too much in that sense to kind of go with, so it's nothing too special, but had he been given a better script perhaps, and a better villain and stuff, and the tone had been maybe like The Spy Who Loved Me, I think he could have given another really great performance, but that isn't the case. But the next film, of course, For Your Eyes Only, now that is yes, this film, of course, is sandwiched in between these two films here that actually are my favourite two Roger Moore Bonds. So yeah, I love these two films. Hear what I have to say about For Your Eyes Only in the next review, and I'll be watching that tomorrow, which is Friday tomorrow, and yes, I look forward to that very much so. And yes, in terms of this film, Moonraker, I think it's a film that interestingly really receives a lot of hate, mainly critically it seems, at times, but yes, taking everything into account, I think it's an enjoyable film. It's nothing too special. It has a few things that I don't like about the film, really at all, and it does have a lot of flaws, some flat moments, and just really bizarre moments, and it's nothing kind of that I really truly get invested in, but it's a film that I sit back and I watch, I enjoy it. I think it's a pretty okay film, and nothing horrendous, overall at all. And for me, this film, yeah, it's an average Bond. It's an enjoyable Bond, one that's very well shot. Very impressive score. The music and the visuals, and just the relaxing feel is something that I like the most about the film. So in that sense, yes, in my opinion, this is an average film, and I think definitely an enjoyable one. Definitely one to admire, and just to kind of get some some enjoyment from, and kind of an innocence. So in that sense, I have to give this film a rating of 63%. I think this is an accurate score, for my enjoyment throughout the entire film, and what I think personally of the quality of the film. Some of you viewers may be thinking, that's very high for a film that isn't, maybe one of your favourites. It's not one of my favourites. I don't consider this to be, for example, the best Roger Moore Bond film. It's nothing that I love. It's nothing kind of too special in my opinion. But at the same time, I don't think this is bad. I don't think this is kind of a film that it's kind of a low point in the franchise at all. It's definitely not a high point in my opinion. It's just kind of it's a middling Bond. It's a one that's it's not one of the worst Bonds in that sense, I don't feel, but again, it's nothing kind of top 10 material. So yeah, a kind of an enjoyable film. It has quite a few flaws, and it's got yeah, it's really flat moments at times, and at the same time, silly moments, but moments that I can't say kind of moments I love because of how silly they are, but I kind of get some enjoyment from really most parts of the film, and yeah, I think give this a watch if you haven't seen it, and if you have only seen this film once, maybe rewatch this film if you get the time, because actually it's the one that's grown on me quite a bit, and yeah, I think having watched this film, well, it's last week now actually, I believe, and yes, having watched this film again, the other day kind of thing, I think it's a film I can definitely say I like. It's definitely grown on me, personally, and yes, it goes to show that even the films, that you kind of see that are very very panned, for example, critically, in that sense, within Bond, even they can be, for any individual, highly enjoyable, or just even mildly enjoyable, in the sense of my experience with the film. I think it's a film, it may be really really panned at times, but I enjoy it personally. I'm not saying this is the best Bond of all time, or anything like that, but I do find some things to really kind of enjoy and appreciate. And yes, I think technically, in terms of the filmmaking, some really really impressive moments here, and just a really wonderful kind of score, and yes, overall use of music. So there we have it. Not much more to say. It's got its flaws. It's nothing too special at all, but it's not. By no means is this kind of a bad Bond film overall. So yes, Moonraker. Again, quite an unpopular film, this, but I do like the film. Certainly now. So yeah, it's a film that's grown on me. It's a film that I do like, and I think it's a pretty okay Bond film, with some really good elements. But overall as a piece, as a film, as a kind of investing film, perhaps it's not quite there for the kind of the higher marks, but I do like it, and it's definitely I definitely do find some comfort in this film, and as a Bond film, yeah, it has its place, no doubt, and some memorable kind of moments, of course, with the cable car as well, with Jaws. That's one of my favourite moments in the film. That's really really enjoyable actually, and some silly moments and unnecessary moments again within that sequence, but it's moments like that, at the same time, I do really really enjoy. So yeah, it's a pretty average film. It's a film that I like, and yes, tell me your thoughts on this film. Always really really interesting to see what you think of these Bond films, especially these ones that are kind of maybe more divisive, because you could get either a kind of way of response. So it's just interesting to see what you think of this film, and yes, as I always say, I look forward to the next Bond review, and then of course, in that sense, talking to you, about this absolutely legendary creation that is James Bond. Wow, I'm getting so pumped, for tomorrow. Well, I think actually we're nearly at 12 o'clock, so it could be today in that sense. But yes, of course, for your eyes only, I cannot wait to watch this. Of course, Bond Friday. I think actually, here's a question to you viewers. Of course, what do you think is the best day to watch a Bond film on? Could that be a Sunday? I think for me it's probably a Sunday. There's something about maybe it's because watching Bond films when I was younger on a Sunday, but a Sunday Bond is really like no other, and it's something about a Sunday that can be more comforting, for particularly a Bond film, and not to say that that's my favourite day of the week or anything, but yeah, I think for Bond actually, Sundays could be best. Fridays are great, though. That's the kind of the 2 days that I love to watch Bond on. Saturdays are also nice, and maybe even Thursday, nice too. But yeah, anyway, that is just a little question, and something that I always think about, in terms of the comfort, the kind of nostalgic element to watching Bond. Is it a Sunday? Is it a Saturday? A Friday? What is it? Tell me if you want. What's your favourite day for watching Bond? I know there's kind of very maybe a weird question, but yeah, tell me your thoughts on that, and of course, tell me your thoughts on Moonraker, a very, very divisive Bond, but yeah, great to talk about nevertheless, and as always, of course, stay safe, and yes, watch films, of course, and talk about cinema here on the channel. We'll get a discussion, as always, going on these different films, and Bond films, this film in particular, and of course, cinema. So yes, as always, thanks for watching.